I yield back.
Mr. Clyde?
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Director Wray, as I'm sure you know, this week the House has been considering the reauthorization of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, commonly known as FISA. I've been deeply troubled with the abuse of Section 702 of FISA in recent years, and so your testimony today is very well timed. Thank you. So, Director Wray, does the FBI currently comply in every way with the current Section 702 of FISA?
My understanding is that we're in compliance with the law.
Okay, so you think you do. All right, how do you respond to an unsealed document released by the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court on May 19th, 2023, which states your agency, the FBI, illegally misused this tool more than 278,000 times between 2020 and early 2021? And is this number of 278,000 abuses accurate?
So I appreciate the question. I'm glad to have the opportunity to clarify that. So first off, I would say that that opinion covers activity, querying activity that occurs all before all these reforms that we've put in place. So that's number one. Second,
When did you start putting those reforms in place?
Mid
after this?
2022, somewhere in that range.
2022 or 2023?
They started in 2022 and they kind of rolled into 23. They obviously don't
Okay,
just
all
flick
right.
a switch. But,
All right.
but the second thing I would say too is when you look at the FISA court, the same judges evaluating our compliance with 702 after all those reforms have put in place, you see consistently compliance rates well into the high 90% range. And the court actually commending the FBI for the improvements that they've seen because of the reform. So that's a second point.
Okay.
A third
so-
point I would make to you, third point, this is important because you asked, a third point that is important is that the querying that you're talking about in that opinion that again covers older activity, something like 99.7% of it would all have been prevented by the reforms that we've put in place.
Okay.
On top of that, the vast majority of those queries, the 278,000, are not actually 702 queries, much less non-compliant 702 queries.
Well, let me ask you this. This report ended in early 2021, and you started in mid-2022, so that would be an entire year. So during that time frame, how many times did the FBI abuse its FISA authority? Do you know?
I don't have any period of non-compliance that I can report here from that period, but I can
Okay.
tell you. But I can tell you this.
Well,
The
all right,
court, the court's
thank you for answering
opinion
that
that covers
question.
the more recent period.
As you know, the
Once
government
it's not.
agencies typically need a warrant issued by a judge before they can access American citizens' phone calls, texts, internet searches, and emails. However, the government, in my opinion, has been able to query Section 702 acquired communications as an end run around the Fourth Amendment. My colleague, Andy Biggs, representative from Arizona, has an amendment to the current FISA reauthorization that would require the government to obtain a warrant or to obtain a FISA court order prior to conducting a U.S. citizen query of information already collected through the 702 FISA program. You know, you previously stated in a Senate hearing in December that it would be unworkable to require the government to get a warrant before collecting Americans' private communications. Yet former NSA lawyer George Kroner recently estimated the warrant requirement would force the FBI to get about 3 warrants a day. Now, Director Wray, you've got more than 30,000 employees that work for the FBI. Are you seriously saying that 3 warrants a day is too much of a burden for the FBI to protect our Fourth Amendment rights?
That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, number one, no court has found that the Fourth Amendment requires us to use a warrant to look at information, to query information that's already in our 702 holdings lawfully, and the only courts to look at it have gone the other way. That's one. Number two, the problem with the warrant requirement goes beyond any kind of burden or delay that comes with it. The big part of the problem is that it's often only by running the query that we get to see the information that tells us whether or not we would meet a warrant requirement in the first place.
All right,
these
I've
are
got one more
conducted
question
at the
for you
front
before my
end
time
of
runs
the
out.
Investigation.
All right. We have, looking at the breakdown of the FBI's $11.3 billion budget, Like last year, almost 60% of the budget is categorized as defense spending and only 40% as non-defense spending. And to me, that seems odd. I read your mission priorities, and I did not see any reference to DoD. I mean, the FBI is not part of the Department of Defense, and they're a domestic law enforcement agency. So why is the FBI's budget categorized as 60% defense spending?
I believe the answer to your question, and I'm not an appropriations expert, but I believe the answer to your question is what's so-called NIP funding, which is overseen by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So a significant chunk of our budget is considered defense spending because of its part of the intelligence community budget, if you will. So it gets a little more complicated than that, but I think that's the high-level answer to your question.
Okay, all right. My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.